I never planned for it to be permanent. When Melba Joe called me that afternoon in March, crying about how the lease on their apartment had fallen through, I didn't even hesitate. "You can stay here," I said, "just until you get back on your feet." That was the deal. A temporary solution. Family helping family. That's what we say, right? That's what we believe, until the help starts to feel like a surrender. I worked hard for this house. Freelancing nights, skipping vacations, building up savings bit by bit while everyone else was buying things they couldn't afford. No one handed it to me. There was no inheritance, no cosigner, no safety net. Just me and a stubborn belief that I could carve out something for myself, even if no one ever noticed. I called it my quiet place. A 2-bedroom duplex at the edge of Round Rock, nothing flashy, but it felt like mine. My space. My peace. Away from the noise of judgment, of holiday conversations that always circled back to how Melba was doing everything right, and I was just there, quiet, helpful, single. So I let them in. Her, the kids, Duke. Just for a little while. And for a while, it was okay. Until one morning, I walked past the mailbox and stopped. I don't know what I was expecting to see. Maybe just my last name, that small confirmation, that quiet reminder that, despite all the noise inside now, this place was still mine. But it wasn't there. Instead, the box read, "The Castine Family," in big, friendly black lettering, not a sticker, a printed laminated tag, screwed in. I stared at it. My keys still worked. My car was still in the driveway. But my name was gone. Maybe they just wanted the neighbors to feel comfortable, I told myself. Maybe it was for the kids. Maybe it was just a placeholder. But the fact that no one had mentioned it, that part stuck. They didn't even ask. That evening, at dinner, my mom casually said something about how the grandkids are so lucky to have a second home now. My father nodded. Melba laughed. Second home, not mine, theirs. In their heads, the transition had already happened. I sat there with a fork in my hand and smiled like it didn't sting. Later that week, I overheard my aunt on the phone with my mom. "So how's Melba settling into her place?" she asked. Her place. I walked into the living room and saw that some of my framed photos had been swapped out. New photos, family shots of Melba, Duke, and the kids, lined the mantel. I didn't say a word. My mother, catching me looking, said, "It's just practical, honey. You're barely here these days anyway." And maybe that was true. I traveled a lot for work. Long assignments, short trips. Enough to make people believe I didn't need roots. But that doesn't mean I don't want them. The first time I really felt it, like something had cracked open inside me, was the key incident. I came home early from a client meeting and found Daryl in the kitchen. He was barefoot, opening one of my wine bottles like it was nothing. "Didn't expect you back so soon," he said, grinning. "How did you get in?" I asked, not angry, just blank. "Your mom gave me a key, weeks ago, said I'd need it." A key. To my house, without a conversation, without permission. I swallowed. "I didn't know you had access." He shrugged. "Come on, we're family." And that was that. Somewhere along the line, my generosity had been mistaken for a lifetime membership. My kindness was now property. Later that night, I lay in bed thinking about the patterns. Youngest. Unmarried. No kids. Flexible. That's what I was to them. The helper. The backup plan. The one who could adjust. I remembered birthdays where I paid for everyone. Christmases I hosted because no one else had time. School fees I chipped in for. Groceries I covered. All those moments where I stayed quiet and thought, "It's okay, it's just for now." I heard this line once on a podcast. Silence can look a lot like consent. And maybe I'd been consenting to this treatment longer than I wanted to admit. Maybe my silence was never safety. Maybe it was surrender. A few days later, we had dinner again. Claudine had her place settings all laid out. Napkins, utensils, little folded name cards. There was no card for me. No napkin with my name. I took the extra one from the side, folded it myself, and slid it into my lap. Next time, I bring my own. It was supposed to be a few days. Melba Joe had said it over the phone like it was a favor to her, not a decision for me. Just a week or two till we find something, she'd promised. At the time, I believed her. Or maybe I believed in the idea of family too much to question it. I even cleared out the spare room for them, my workspace. It wasn't just an office. It was where my thoughts landed after long hours, where my books lived, where my life made sense. There was a big window that caught morning light, a quiet nook where I could breathe. I packed it up gently, boxed the files, folded the comfort of routine. After a short trip out of town for work, I returned early one morning and walked past the hallway. The door was cracked open. I caught a whiff of something, baby powder. My chest sank before I even pushed the door open. Inside, the room had been gutted and replaced. New paint, soft colors, a mobile spinning above a white crib, teddy bears stacked in a basket. My desk? Gone. My bookshelf? Dismantled. A hand-scrawled note taped to the door from the inside. Quiet, please. Baby sleeping. It felt like walking into someone else's home, except I hadn't left mine. Later that evening, I mentioned it to Melba Joe while we were rinsing dishes. "Oh, I figured you'd be fine with it," she said casually, not even looking up. "You're barely here anyway." That sentence stayed with me long after the dishes were put away. Barely here? It didn't stop with the room. Over the next few days, I noticed the fridge had become a battleground. Breast milk bags stacked across every shelf, each one marked in thick Sharpie. "Do not move, moms." My juice, my small leftovers, shoved to the side like afterthoughts. On Tuesday, Daryl screwed a baby monitor into the hallway wall. Didn't ask, didn't mention. I walked past and realized it wasn't just a monitor, it was recording. I saw the blinking red light. The home I'd built wasn't just being borrowed. It was being redesigned without me. Little things changed in conversation, too. Claudine now referred to the place as the Castine household. She did it smoothly, like she believed it. My father followed suit. I started hearing phrases like the kids' home base or Melba's second chance tossed around, like I didn't exist, I didn't explode. That's not my style. But I wrote it all down, every time, every word. Even silence deserves a paper trail. A week later, I received an envelope in the mail from the city. Inside was a confirmation letter, something about a housing assistance review. At first, I thought it was junk. Then I read the name, Melba Castine. The address? Mine. Not her old place, not a typo. I called the number. After long hold music and 3 transfers, someone confirmed the application. "Yes," the woman said, "we received documents listing this as the primary residence of Mrs. Melba Castine and her dependents." I hung up and drove straight to my mother's. She was baking something. Peach cobbler, I think. I didn't sit. "Why did you let them use my address for government paperwork?" I asked. She wiped her hands on a towel and gave me that soft-eyed, sweet-voiced answer she always defaulted to when she knew she'd crossed a line. "Sweetheart, it's just paperwork. Nothing to worry about. We're family." That word, family, it stopped working for me right then. It wasn't just a word anymore. It was a tool, a shield, an excuse. You can do anything to someone as long as you say it's out of love. And if they protest, you call them cold, distant, ungrateful. I started feeling like I was the uninvited guest at a dinner party held in my own kitchen. At a neighborhood barbecue the next weekend, Daryl made a joke in front of the neighbors. "Don't mind the landlord, she just misses her books." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I stood there, nodding politely, gripping a paper plate like it was a lifeline. I smiled for them. But inside, something had shifted. I saw what was happening. They weren't taking advantage of me accidentally. They were doing it comfortably. Because I'd made it easy. Because I hadn't screamed when my name was replaced. Because I didn't protest when the nursery replaced my desk. Because I smiled at the barbecue. My silence had become a foundation they were happy to build their comfort on. And the worst part? They dressed it up like gratitude. That evening, I sorted through the day's mail. Just flyers, a few bills. One envelope was addressed to someone else. But it wasn't a mistake. It read, "To Mrs. Melba Castine, primary resident." I stood there in front of the mailbox, holding it with both hands. Primary resident. I didn't say anything out loud, but inside, something said, Not yet. They told me it was just a family dinner. Nothing fancy, nothing formal, just catching up, my mother had said over the phone. She sounded sweet, comforting even. Like she used to sound when I was younger, back when I still believed a certain tone meant safety. I hesitated at first. I'd had a long week and I was tired of pretending, but something in me still wanted to be seen. So I showed up. I ironed a clean blouse, brushed my hair, grabbed a bottle of red wine and headed back to the house that now felt unfamiliar. The moment I stepped through the door, something felt off. Laughter that was too loud, decorations that didn't belong, music coming from a Bluetooth speaker on the counter. Then I saw it. A banner. Hand-painted, taped above the kitchen arch. "Welcome home, Castine family!" My hand tightened around the bottleneck. Melba Jo was already hugging people. My mother was wiping a tear from her eye like her daughter had returned from war. My dad raised his glass and clinked it with Daryl's like they'd just closed on a dream house together. No one acknowledged me, not right away. I stood in the entryway, wine still in hand, feeling like a guest in the place my name used to be on, feeling like a ghost. Then came the toast. "To Melba and Duke," my father began, his voice warm and proud, "for bringing new life to this home." Not their home, not my home, just this home, like it belonged to the wind now. They all clapped. I smiled faintly and nodded. I knew better than to interrupt a performance. Dinner was loud. The table was full. I was placed at the far end, near the trash can, no joke, while the main circle of the family clustered around the centerpiece. No one offered me a plate. I served myself. As they passed wine glasses and laughter, no one mentioned the mortgage I paid, the lawn I maintained, the roof I fixed after last year's storm. Melba Jo raised her glass, beaming. "To fresh starts," she said, "and finally settling in where we belong." People clinked glasses. I chewed slowly, not even tasting the food. I never thought I'd have to RSVP to my own table. After dessert, they wheeled in a small projector. Someone had prepared a slideshow. Of course they had. The screen flickered on. Soft music played. And there it was. My living room, my backyard, my kitchen, my walls, photo after photo, Melba and her kids baking, Daryl grilling, Claudine planting flowers with the little ones. There were no photos of me, not even one. Then it paused on a wide shot, my dining room. Melba and her family sat around it like a magazine ad. I wasn't in the frame, but I remembered that day. I was the one who took the photo. The screen stayed there a little too long. People started nodding, murmuring. Someone whispered, "That's beautiful." My dad, eyes glassy, said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "This will be the one we hang in the hallway." It's perfect. Perfect. That one hit harder than anything anyone had said that year. My mom stood up after and lifted her glass again. "And lastly, to Tirza," she said, smiling like she was doing me a favor, "for being the kind of sister who gives without asking, who doesn't need recognition to be generous." The claps were soft, kind, patronizing. They called it a toast. I heard a eulogy, because what they were applauding wasn't kindness. It was absence. It was the space I'd vacated that they filled so well, they forgot I'd ever been there. I left early, told them I had an early morning. No one stopped me. I drove around the neighborhood for an hour, past the gas station, the park where I used to jog, the grocery store I still paid for snacks from when their kids wanted something. I circled and circled until I could pull up to the house again without shaking. Inside, the lights were still on. Laughter echoed faintly from behind the curtains. I walked to the hallway where the photos were hung. Fresh nails, new frames. There it was. The family photo from the slideshow, printed and already mounted. I stepped closer. I could see the corner of the table I'd bought, the curtains I'd sewn, the seat where I had once sat. I reached out and touched the empty space beside it. "I was standing right there," I whispered. "I just wasn't seen." It started with a leak under the kitchen sink. Simple. Manageable. I called a plumbing service first thing in the morning and gave them the details. "Unit A," I said. "Under Whitlow." The woman on the line confirmed the appointment, said someone would be there around 10. I made coffee, opened my laptop, answered a few emails. Around 10:15, the doorbell rang. The guy was wearing a clean uniform and held a clipboard like he meant business. "You must be Mrs. Castine," he said as he stepped in. I blinked. "No, I'm Tirza Whitlow. This is my home." He checked the clipboard again. Order was placed under a Melba Castine, marked homeowner. There was a long pause between us. "It's been like that on a few service calls lately," he added. "Guess the office just logs whoever's name is on the client file." I nodded slowly, lips tight. "Do what you need to do," I said. He got to work. I stood by the counter, letting it sink in. Homeowner. After he left, I tried to tell myself it was just a clerical error. Maybe Melba had filled out the form because she happened to be home that day. Maybe the office made a mistake. Maybe it wasn't a big deal. But that night, I got the envelope. The return address said County Recorder's Office. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the edge of the table while I made tea. Then I read it. The letter was short, clinical. "This is a confirmation of property ownership update per revised records effective May 5th. Ownership update? I flipped to the second page. There it was, in black and white. The property, my duplex, was now registered under Castine Holdings, LLC. I wasn't listed anywhere. No co-owner, no primary holder, no also known as. Just gone. I didn't sign anything. I didn't sell anything. I didn't agree to anything. I reread the lines until the words blurred. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I drove to the county office without calling. I needed to see it for myself. The clerk at the desk was polite, efficient. He typed in the address and printed the paperwork. "It was filed as a transfer under an amended family trust," he explained. "It's not uncommon. Looks like your father was still listed as guarantor on the original deed, which allowed some conditional rights." I didn't hear the rest. The name of the new company was typed in bold. Castine Holdings. My family name was gone. I flipped through the documents and saw something worse. My signature. Right there. "That's not from this," I said. The clerk adjusted his glasses. "It's scanned, from a previous refinancing file, probably pulled for verification." They reused my signature, from a different document, without permission. I stood there holding paper that said I no longer owned the home I paid for, the one I maintained, the one they now used like it was theirs all along. I didn't cry. Not then. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was my mother. "I heard you went to the county," she said. "Don't overreact, Tirza. It's all still in the family." That phrase again. "I didn't sign anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Weldon did what he had to do," she said. "Your sister needs a clean record on the property. For daycare grants, school documents, we couldn't keep bouncing names around." I didn't answer right away. "Besides," she added, "you're always gone. You said yourself this house is just where you rest between trips." I ended the call mid-sentence, not in anger, in exhaustion. Back at the house, I sat at the dining table and stared at a photo. It was one of those new ones from the slideshow. Melba, Duke, the kids. The table, the chairs, the walls were mine. Everything else wasn't. There was no me in it. My therapist once said, "When someone rewrites your story, they try to rewrite yourself." I didn't mind helping Melba. I didn't even hate that they lived here. What cut deep was the belief that I wouldn't notice when I was erased, that I wouldn't fight it, that I'd shrug and go quiet like always. I stood up, walked to the office, pulled out the file box, printed every email, every application, every voicemail, every misused signature, every edit, each one placed into a new binder, neat, labeled, dated. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I was going to do something. They think I'm the quiet one. That's the best position to strike from. It was the first quiet Saturday I'd had in weeks. I turned down an invite from my aunt, passed on a brunch text from a coworker, and even silenced my email. All I wanted was to breathe. Maybe finish the photo restoration project I'd been chipping away at. Maybe read. Maybe sit still and not feel like I was in the way of my own life. I padded down the hall in slippers, coffee in hand, ready to step back into the office I'd made mine years ago. That room always anchored me, even when everything else drifted. The door was closed. Strange. I pushed it open. What greeted me wasn't mine. Gone were the shelves I built by hand, the framed certificates, the worn leather chair that shaped to my back after late-night deadlines. Gone. In their place stood a toddler's tent, a foam alphabet mat, a pink bin labeled in thick Sharpie, Misk Tea. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. That label told me everything. Miscellaneous. I wasn't even categorized anymore. Just shoved into the corner like seasonal junk. The silence in that room hit harder than shouting ever could. Later that day, I opened the hallway closet. I don't even know why. Curiosity, maybe. Instinct. Maybe I just wanted to see how far they'd gone. There they were, my things, boxed, taped, labeled like donations for goodwill. One box read, "Donate." Another, "T's office, ask later." My notebook sat under an open box of formula cans. A dusty laptop bag dangled off a broken hanger. On the top shelf, I spotted a sealed envelope addressed to Resident. Not to me, not even a courtesy T. Whitlow. Just Resident. Melba walked by with a laundry basket, didn't break stride. "Oh, Mom thought you wouldn't mind," she said, tossing the words like they weighed nothing. We needed the space. I didn't trust my voice not to crack, so I didn't use it. Around 4 that afternoon, I had a checkup scheduled. One of those "you're almost 40" physicals that insurance practically begs you to take. The clinic was quiet. Fluorescent lights, soft jazz, a stack of old Reader's Digests. I sat on the paper-covered exam table while the nurse clicked away at her screen. "So," she said casually, "you're still at 1043 Willow Way? Living with the Castine family?" I looked at her. "Excuse me?" She blinked, then turned the monitor toward herself. "That's what we have listed. Household, Castine. Primary, Melba. Secondary, Tirza. You're listed as guardian on 2 minors and emergency contact for all 3. My chest tightened. "No," I said. "I didn't submit any of that." She squinted. "Well, someone did. Must have been family?" I stared at the screen. At my name, now linked to a set of dependents that weren't mine, to a woman who no longer treated me as anything but convenient infrastructure. Even my blood type wasn't enough to keep my identity intact, I muttered under my breath. She didn't hear me. By the time I got home, the sun had started dipping. The driveway was full. Again. I parked by the curb. Inside, the smell of pineapple and mint wafted from the kitchen. Claudine was slicing fruit like it was any other day, like I hadn't just learned that my personal medical record had been rewritten by a woman who thought I was furniture. I watched her for a second, her easy humming, the soft thud of knife against cutting board. "Did you know Melba changed my medical file?" I asked, low and measured. She didn't look up. "Don't turn this into a drama, sweetheart." "Claudine? You're too sensitive. Everything's still here, isn't it?" She gestured around the room like she was showing off a staged open house. I looked around. The walls once held my framed degrees. Now, family portraits, smiling kids. A painted sign that read, "Home is where the heart is." Yeah. But what if the heart doesn't belong to you anymore? That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I needed space. Not metaphorical, real, physical space. I went out to the garage, sat beside the stack of boxes that used to be a room. I opened the first one. There it was. My college graduation photo. The one where I wore the blue honor sash and held Dad's hand on stage. The glass was cracked. The frame was bent. I ran my thumb along the jagged edge and whispered, "You didn't even ask." No one heard it, and maybe that was the point. For a second, I thought about loading the boxes into my trunk, leaving, starting over, letting them have the house and the narrative, the story they were so eager to tell without me. But something deep inside, some shadow of anger that had been quiet for far too long, stopped me. I wasn't done yet. Sitting there, I pulled out my phone. A notification blinked at the top of the screen. Text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Castine, here's the updated PTA schedule. See you Monday." I stared at it. My jaw clenched. I typed, "Wrong number." Paused, deleted it, typed again. Right house, wrong woman. Then I put the phone down. Saturday started quiet. I had picked up a few groceries, nothing major, just some fruit, coffee, bread. I figured I'd finally get around to replacing the light bulb in the hallway, maybe catch up on reading. A rare weekend without work deadlines or people needing something from me. As I came up the front steps, I heard voices. Melba's youngest was sitting on the porch with one of the neighbor kids, legs dangling over the edge, trading snacks like baseball cards. "That's our maid," he said, pointing toward the driveway. The neighbor boy squinted. "You guys have a maid?" "Yeah, she lives in the back." I stood there with a loaf of sourdough tucked under my arm, frozen. The mother next door, standing nearby with a cup of coffee, smiled at me nervously. Not sure if she should say something. I nodded, tight-lipped, and walked past them without a word. Inside, I set the bags down, closed the door behind me carefully. I didn't want it to slam. It wasn't his fault. He was a child, repeating what he heard, or maybe what he assumed after weeks of watching everyone else treat me like furniture. I stood in the kitchen for a while, didn't unpack anything, just stared at the fridge. It was covered in lists, PTA meeting times, Melba's meal plan, a dentist reminder for Ledger. Not one note was in my handwriting. Not one space held anything of mine. The fridge used to be covered in my sticky notes, reminders to myself about deadlines or ideas mid-thought. Now it was a bulletin board for someone else's life. It wasn't just the fridge, it was the whole house. No one ever introduced me as Tirza. I was the helper, the one who's been here a while, the aunt who works remote. Melba once called me family support to a friend who visited, said it like I was a feature of the house. Being helpful should never mean becoming invisible. Later that afternoon, I checked my voicemail. One new message. "Hi, Ms. Whitlow, this is Sharon from Rock Creek Elementary. Just confirming your attendance for Monday's Guardian Teacher Conference with Ledger Castine. Please bring any medical records or documents you have for enrollment verification. Thank you." I hit replay 3 times. I never enrolled Ledger, never offered to be a guardian, never saw the form. I called the school. "Hi, this is Tirza Whitlow. I just received a message about a school conference. I think there's been a mix-up." There was a pause on the other end. Typing. "Oh," the receptionist said brightly. "No, you're listed as the legal point of contact. Mrs. Castine submitted your name and address as part of the household." "She what?" "It's just for district alignment, ma'am. It's common when extended family live together. It helps with funding and zoning." No one asked me. Melba took my name, again. This time for something legal, something that could show up in state files, something that might stick. My name was being used, my signature implied, my role assumed. I wasn't just being excluded anymore, I was being repurposed. That night, dinner was lasagna. I waited until everyone had taken a seat. Then I said, "Why is the school calling me Ledger's guardian?" Melba didn't miss a beat. "You've always been around anyway. It made sense to list you. Don't overthink it." I put my fork down. Slowly. "So it's okay to erase me in one room and assign me responsibility in another?" The air went still. Daryl looked up from his plate. "Come on, it's not that deep." I stared at him. "You don't get to say that. Not when it's my name on documents I didn't see." No one replied. No apology, no backpedal, just silence and a few shifting glances. I didn't finish dinner. I went straight to the room I used to call mine, locked the door, sat down at the desk they'd tried to turn into a diaper-changing station, opened my laptop. I didn't look up real estate law this time. I looked up identity theft, guardianship fraud, paperwork misrepresentation. I pulled up old emails, screenshotted texts, downloaded voicemails, labeled folders. If they wanted to put me in the system without permission, I'd show them what that meant. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharper than grief. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Near midnight, I walked past the kitchen to get water. Something caught my eye on the fridge, a crayon drawing taped to the center, Ledger's handwriting, crude but clear. The drawing was of the house, the family. Mom, Dad, me. And off to the side, a stick figure holding a mop, label T. I stared at it for a while, then I peeled it off, folded it in half, walked away. I went back to the county office because something didn't sit right. After everything I'd uncovered, I needed to see the foundation. the origin of the shift. Paperwork doesn't lie, but the people who file it often do. The clerk was polite. He tapped on his keyboard, printed 2 sets of documents, then explained it without flinching. The property was originally purchased under your name with a co-signed family trust. Your father, Mr. Weldon Whitlow, retained silent co-ownership as guarantor. I said nothing. He continued. In 2020, the trust was amended. It allowed for the transfer to a secondary entity, Castine Holdings. I blinked slowly, but I never signed anything. He glanced down at the page. Your signature is here, scanned from a refinancing form on file. Of course it was. It's legal, he said. I took the papers from the desk. So was slavery, I said. Didn't make it moral. Outside, the wind picked up. I clutched the envelope like it might blow away. In a sense, everything already had. When I got home, the mail was waiting in the box. Bills, flyers, and one thick envelope with gold script that read, "To the Castine family." I opened it with a key I still carried. Inside was a community newsletter and an invitation to a neighborhood garden tour. The duplex, my duplex, was listed as one of the hosts. Under the heading, it read, "Hosted by Melba Jo Castine, homeowner." I stood in the foyer, the tile cold beneath my feet. Even my neighbors believed the lie now. I scanned the invitation, filed a copy, then ripped the original in half and tossed it in the trash. This wasn't just about them. It was about me. That night after dinner, I sat across from my father in the dining room. The one I paid for. The one that still had a faint scrape from where I dragged the old couch in by myself the first day I moved in. I laid the folder down on the table. Quietly. Cleanly. Inside were copies of the trust amendments. The deed transfers, the scanned signature, the invitation. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Weldon looked at me like I'd asked him why the sky was blue. "You were always too independent to care about titles." I stared at him. "That's why you thought you could take mine." He folded his hands. "This is family business. You're acting like an outsider." That word sat between us like smoke. I'd become the outsider because I never begged to be included. Because I didn't whine. Because I wasn't messy. Because I didn't need rescuing. Melba played the game. I paid the mortgage. And yet here we were. I didn't fight. Not that night. Instead, I spent the next 3 days in research. I built a timeline, cross-referenced every document, notarized statements, consulted legal forums. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to file. I submitted a notice of revocation of interest. That meant an automatic audit on the trust. A legal trigger that would require all parties to respond. No confrontation, just quiet disruption. They think silence is surrender. It's not. It's strategy. The backlash came quicker than I expected. Melba stormed into the kitchen one afternoon, hair pinned, face flushed. "Did you file something against the trust? Are you serious?" I didn't rise from the stool. "Check your inbox." She sputtered something under her breath, turned on her heel, and left. By the next morning, the neighborhood whisper chain had begun. "She's suing her own family." Some people can't handle sharing. "My sister's in law enforcement. She said this kind of thing gets ugly." I heard it all. Even the looks changed. Neighbors I used to wave to gave curt nods or avoided my eyes. People I shared holidays with didn't reply to my texts. It stung, but it also confirmed one thing. I had rattled the hive. One afternoon, a delivery van pulled up to the driveway. The man walked up to the door with a flat package, handed it off, smiled. "Nice plate," he said. I opened the box. Inside was a custom-made mailbox nameplate, polished brass, black lettering, the Castines 1043 Willow Way. I turned it over in my hands. No note, no invoice. I hadn't ordered it. I didn't need to ask who did. "They keep building names on my silence," I said out loud. I didn't hang it. I placed it on my desk, right next to the eviction notice I was now drafting. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the folding chairs were already out. Long tables stretched across the lawn like they'd always belonged there. A buffet station was being draped in fabric I didn't recognize. Bluetooth speakers blasted soft jazz that didn't belong to my playlist. Melba Jo was on the porch, laughing too loud. Daryl walked through the yard like he owned it, giving handshakes and pats on the back. Welcome to the Castines, he bellowed to someone I didn't recognize. No one had asked me. Again. A woman I'd seen walking her dog passed by and smiled. Beautiful setup. You all make this place feel like home. I nodded, jaw tight. Funny thing was, I just didn't know it wasn't mine anymore. I stepped inside to drop off my bag. The scent of pulled pork and sweet tea hit me like a punch. They had catered, used my kitchen, my platters, my home, without a single heads up. Guests kept trickling in. Neighbors, friends of friends. Someone brought a fruit tray and asked where to set it down. I pointed toward the table and went to the sink. That's when it started. A woman walked up to me while I was wiping down the counter. "Excuse me, can you point me to the homeowner?" I blinked. "I'm sorry?" She glanced toward the lawn. "Mrs. Castine, I was told she's hosting." I stared at her for a beat before pointing silently in Melba's direction. Then another asked me to refill lemonade, handed me the pitcher like it was routine, like I was on staff. Each one dug a little deeper, a scratch here, a sting there. My mother hovered nearby. When she introduced Melba to a group of neighbors, she used the phrase that finally did it. "She's the anchor of this home," Claudine said, touching Melba's shoulder like she was handing over a medal. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't smile. I watched. I listened. After dinner, people shuffled toward the yard. Someone dimmed the lights. A projector lit up the side wall of the house, soft music. The first slide, the Castine family, a home reclaimed. Photo after photo rolled across the wall. My kitchen, my garden, my hallway mirror with their coats hung on it. But not one picture of me, not even in the background. They had either cropped me out or never included me to begin with. The final slide read, "Thank you, Melba Duke, for reviving 1043 Willow Way." People clapped, loud. I stood there, a wine glass in my hand, numb. They didn't just take my house, they rewrote its story, and they didn't think I'd notice. When the applause faded, I walked to the buffet table, calm, measured. I placed a simple manila folder beside the punch bowl. "Before we all go," I said, voice steady, "I'd like to correct the record." Silence. I opened the folder, pulled out 3 sheets. A copy of the deed, a legal motion for trust audit, and a notarized timeline. "The title you're celebrating," I said, holding it up, "is under litigation. The person you're applauding, not on the mortgage, never has been." Someone in the back gasped. A man said under his breath, "Wait, she owns this place?" Melba Joe stepped forward, face pale. "Tirza, this isn't the time." "But you had time to show my kitchen in a video," I cut in. "You had time to replace me in every photo." Claudine looked like she'd been slapped. Daryl clenched his jaw but said nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I turned and walked back into the house. I left them to sit with it. The whispers started immediately. I heard one woman say, "Why didn't anyone say something?" Another, "I thought she was just the aunt." Someone pulled out a phone, recorded the whole thing. Let them. That wasn't the point. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Later that night, the chairs were folded, the guests were gone, the lights were off. I sat alone in the dining room. And the same room where I'd been toasted for my silence, where I'd been cropped out of family photos, where I'd watched the narrative bend around me like I was the inconvenience. I opened a drawer, pulled out one of the old monogrammed cloth napkins. It used to be blank. Weeks ago, I'd stitched my name into the corner. Tirza W. Small. Neat. Permanent. I placed it at the head of the table, and I sat, alone. But in my seat, the house was quiet the next morning. The folding chairs were gone. So were the string lights, the buffet trays, the artificial joy. Melba and her family packed up and left sometime during the night before the sun came up. They didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye, not that I needed one. The hallway still held the echo of the evening. My name on the documents, the silence that followed, the way people looked at me like they were seeing something for the first time. I stood where the family portrait used to hang. There was only a nail now, nothing more. Around 2 that afternoon, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Claudine standing there with a half-covered pie tin. Leftovers, she said. I didn't invite her in, but I didn't shut the door either. She stepped inside on her own, moving like the space still belonged to her. We sat at the table. She didn't offer pie. I didn't ask. After a while, she said, I suppose I don't have to ask whose name is on the deed anymore. I kept my eyes on the coffee cup in front of me. She added, softer this time. Still, this place will always feel like Melba's second home to me. That landed like a slap disguised as a compliment. I looked up. Good thing what it feels like and what it is don't always match. She blinked, but didn't argue. That was the last thing she said before she stood, pressed the pie tin into my hands, and left. An hour later, someone else stopped by, a woman I used to work with, Beth from the old project. She held a book I'd lent her a year ago. I was in the neighborhood, she said. Figured I'd drop this off. She stepped inside, looked around. Oh, she said. I thought you were just staying here temporarily. You live here? I nodded. I own it. She stammered. Of course, of course. I mean, with all the banners and pictures, I guess I just assumed. I held the door open for her. Thanks for returning the book, and closed it behind her. That's what happens when you let other people narrate your life long enough. They start believing their version is the truth. Later that night, I sat at my laptop. The lawsuit draft still blinked on the screen. Everything was in place: evidence, timeline, declarations. I could have filed it that night. I could have escalated this entire mess. But something stopped me. What's left to prove? Everyone already knew. They saw it, on paper, on film, in person. I clicked Save as PDF and backed it up to my drive. Then I opened a new email. To my attorney, I wrote, please consider the matter privately closed. I didn't need courtrooms. I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace. As the sun dipped below the blinds, I walked past the hallway again. The mirror from my old room had been reinstalled. I hadn't noticed it before. I paused, looked into it. For the first time in weeks, I saw myself. Not a support beam. Not a background figure, not a placeholder. Just me. I remembered being 13. Melba had won the spelling bee. I'd come in second. No one congratulated me. I spent the rest of the night in my room staring at that same mirror. But now, I wasn't hiding. You weren't weak, I said to the reflection. You were patient. And for once, the woman in the mirror didn't look tired. She looked returned. Later that evening, I set the table for one. The light above the dining room hummed gently. The air smelled of nothing but space. I opened the drawer and pulled out the cloth napkin. Tirza WW. I placed it carefully on the placemat, lit a small candle. Not to celebrate, but to mark the ceremony of return. I sat, took a sip of water, and said, tonight I eat at my table, and I don't owe anyone my seat.